What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. This is one of those videos I've wanted to make for quite some time. I wanted to be very good and at the highest quality. The title run was filled with so many memorable moments that you'll lose count. Some absurd, some hilarious, some memorable, great matches, whatever. And Steve Austin was just the perfect resemblance of the late 90s, no doubt about it. He took the ball and completely ran out of sight. Can't say anything bad about this title reign, to be honest. What's there to say? Austin, he came out of it even more popular than he was previously. I mean, the first night he won the title, the pop that he received was deafening. It was honestly so damn ridiculous, and I don't think we are going to see somebody receive a pop like that in the near future. Like, how is that possible? I don't know. In this video, I cover Stone Cold Steve Austin's first WWF title reign, from post-WrestleMania 14 all the way up to King of the Ring 98. When I was making this video, I was under the impression that I was going to make a video about both of his title reigns. I thought this was going to be a bit short, but man was I wrong. So for me to cover this one, let me give you some background as to where and how Austin won the title. WrestleMania 14, March 29th, 1998, Austin stepped in with one of the all-time greats, Shawn Michaels. I covered that whole story in this video, you can check it out, but long story short, Michaels' back got the best of him during that match, and it was clear that he was in pain. Nonetheless, a 60, doubtful, I don't even know what percent, but it was much less than 70 for sure. HBK was still better than most. He got through the match and put over Austin. And we all know why he did it, but at the end of the day, he did go through with it. And with the title victory, the Austin era has just begun. One thing to note is that Shawn did make quite a fuss during that press conference, and Shane McMahon had to get him out of there, but he was gone. Now, in storyline, despite just becoming the champion, Austin already had an issue. That being, management didn't want him to become the champion in the first place. Vince McMahon, the boss, never wanted Austin as a focal point of the show because he didn't fit his vision of a WWF champion. So basically, Austin's WrestleMania victory was only the beginning. On the March 30th, 1998 episode of Raw's War in Albany, Mr. McMahon opened the show holding the very new WWF Championship. Damn, look at the amount of signs in the crowd. They were anxiously awaiting Austin, not McMahon, and it showed. They were so damn loud that Vince couldn't really hear himself in the arena, and once he did hear himself, he introduced the champ, and they were louder than before. And out he came, the brand new World Wrestling Federation champion, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He quickly swapped the title belts, showing no respect to the old one and no respect to Vince. Once things settled, McMahon tried to clear up his statement from weeks earlier on how he wouldn't want to see Stone Cold as champion. He took a complete 180 turn, saying that he actually is proud of him, and he was just looking for a partnership, you know. He's like, my mental prowess with your physical prowess, you can be the all-time great, blah, blah, blah. Austin knew that his boss dislikes him, but it was okay because he hates him right back. And he wanted to straight up tell Vince that what he sees is what he gets. And his response, well, one thing to know is that McMahon was still very corporate at this point. Hate is not in my vocabulary. I find you to be a swell guy. Hell, Vince even said he loves Austin, and this ticked off the Texas Rattlesnake. It got a bit awkward for the chairman, and he had to loudly say that he loves Steve once again. Austin wasn't having it with the sentimental stuff and promised to raise hell and give Vince gray hairs. He didn't want anybody telling him what to do, and that's the bottom line. Vince's response, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. Austin wanted to know what was the definition of the statement, and McMahon simply wanted Steve to just adapt. The hard way, well, he'll be forced into doing it anyways, whatever Vince McMahon's way is. The champion sarcastically asked for 10 seconds to think about the decision, and he chose his way by delivering a stunner as the fans cheered. He asked the fans if they'd like to see things the hard way. They obliged, and man, was this fun. Nobody in the crowd, in the arena, disliked him, let alone hated Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was just simply the most popular man in professional wrestling at this point, no doubt about it. One of the most popular men in the entire world, as a matter of fact. But hey, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. As a result of this incident, Vince brought in a couple of police officers. A couple of minutes later, they end up arresting the new WWF champion. They almost got into it, but Steve was thrown into the vehicle. And I should ask, like, how many title reigns start off like that? The champion gets arrested the night after his big title victory. Since such a big thing had occurred, the owner of the company decided to come out and discuss why he called the police on his champion. He came out all apologetic, they showed no respect, and he was the most hated man in the entire building. McMahon thought a 24-hour cooling period was good for Steve, and since Austin selected his choice, he selected his also, sending him to jail. Later that night, Austin spent his one phone call from jail on the commentary team. Yep, he ain't calling his lawyer, he decides to call in to the show. He called Vince a sorry SOB, and he stated that his ass belongs to him. Austin promised to show just how pissed off he was the next week. And if that doesn't work, well, he'll pay Vince's ass a visit to his house. Now, a little side note, this was a crazy Raw in general. DX stronger than before, depends on what you think. The star-making image of The Rock, things were happening very quickly and abruptly. The following week, the owner once again opened up the show. He was prepared to give everyone an update on Austin's arrest, and he revealed that Steve was released later that night because he's a good man. He claimed that Austin's learned his lesson the hard way, and yes, this means Austin will no longer be a beer-swelling, foul-mouthed SOB. He guaranteed a new and improved Steve Austin, and he offered the fans their money back if that's not the case. Later on, the owner of the company once again came out and proudly introduced his new WWF champion, and out he came. In a suit? So he's gone corporate. Austin still had ways to go, but the marketing idea was very well received by McMahon. The fans, though, Austin's holding the title like he did back in the early 90s, and McMahon cited this as a giant leap for the World Wrestling Federation. The fans, though, still believed in Stone Cold, and Vince asked about the Gucci shoes. Austin thought they were too tight, but still, the change is welcome. The hat, though, it's gotta go. Then, Vince asked the big question: why did you change? Austin said that he asked himself inside that cell, like, what kind of chance do you have to compete against Vince McMahon? I'm just a guy from Victoria, Texas. He's the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. Hell no do I have a chance against beating a Vince McMahon. Then he asked for a little picture, a snapshot, and he said that the old Steve would have told him to stick it. But the new Stone Cold tells him to get the film developed because this is the absolute last time you'll see Stone Cold Steve Austin wearing a ridiculous suit. Yep, Austin turned up on Vince like 2020 at a moment's notice. He pulled his pants down. He stated that he refuses to change for anybody and then nutshotted him before taking a picture. The fans were cheering on, enjoying what was transpiring. And also, what was the point of the police there? Were they under some cheap contract that doesn't cover nutshots or something? Anyways, the following week though, things escalated in a very big way. First of all, Austin called out McMahon to come down to the ring. He eventually appeared like a little kid, police behind him, and now he's all confident, he's acting all tough. The champion wanted to know who was his opponent for the next pay-per-view, but McMahon, for some odd reason, claimed he hadn't made up his mind yet. He did promise that everyone will know soon though. Steve still was annoyed about McMahon's vision of a champion, and the more and more he thinks about it, Vince wants someone not just like himself, but as a matter of fact, he wants to become the WWF champion. The description in Austin's mind matched. He cracked jokes about him wearing the title at home acting like a jackass, and so for that, a challenge was set forth by the Texas Rattlesnake himself against Vince McMahon for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. He was caught off guard by the announcement, but the fans absolutely 100 times wanted to see it. He even gave a callback to the easy way, hard way statement. Hell, Austin said that he can beat him with one arm tied behind his back. As for the hard way, well, it would have saw Vince get his ass beat inside his office with the world watching anyways. And even if he tries to run away, well, his limo's got 4 slashed tires. The Stooges suggested he accept the challenge and whoop Austin's ass, and eventually the decision was that he's going out there. Austin was really surprised at the decision because it was essentially a no-brainer, so at the end of the night, it was on. The World Wrestling Federation Championship, the boss himself challenges the champ. Shane wasn't on board with Father's Choice, but he's already gotten out the WBF pants. He wasn't going to change his mind then. JR was stressed out over the direction of the company because if Vince goes down, well, how's he going to pay his mortgage? Tensions were high, and that image is worth 10,000 words in my eyes. Vince slaps Austin, and it was on. Now, the boss did have something up his sleeve. He demanded Austin tie his arm behind his back, and the champion wasn't backing down. Vince was clever in tying the stunner arm, and the crowd was rapidly chanting Stone Cold's name. He asked them if they'd like to see a one-arm ass whooping, and they were more than happy. Vince asked the opposite, and they responded with a hell no. Right when the match was about to begin, Boss was wasting time preparing for things, but once it was go time, Dude Love appeared. Austin was fuming, and all he's talking about is how there's not a lot of love around here. He was out here to bring peace, but the fans wanted something else. He injected himself into the whole thing, stating that McMahon writes the checks that allows him to live the life he lives, and Dude was just rambling on until Vince, like a savage, shoved him. All of a sudden, he reverted to Mick Foley and was hell-bent on locking the claw head. Turns out he wanted Austin. The fans booed, and Mick Foley was a heel once again. He continued the assault. Some fans were throwing stuff in protest, and all of a sudden, Vince is all tough now, claiming Dude stole his thunder. Austin had some fight in him, but was unable to neutralize him as Raw went off the air. After the show, though, Stone Cold didn't even remain down for long, and DX came out to get some. The heat in the arena was at maximum capacity. Kane comes in, LOD. What the hell is going on? As you guys may know, this was the episode, and this is something WWF will always tell you, is that they beat Nitro for the first time in about 83 weeks due to this storyline. On the final Raw before Unforgiven in Your House, Dude Love held the Dude Shack. First of all, he was confirmed to be the #1 contender for the title. Second, to give you an understanding of why Mick Foley attacked Austin, Here it is. He was sort of jealous with Austin's popularity. He cut a promo 2 weeks earlier stating that the fans were ungrateful for all the pain he's been through and trying to entertain them. And once they hear Austin's music, they're all happy and they forget about him or something like that. Anyways, on the Shack, Vince fined Foley $5,000 for getting involved in the match the previous week. He didn't want anyone interfering in his business, and he was trying to make it seem like he would have kicked Austin's ass. Afterwards, Dude Love explained why he came out during that match. He said that he wasn't happy about getting sucker punched, but he reminisced about his times with Austin. Despite the whole #1 contender thing, Dude was willing to forgive him if he grovels on his knees. Yeah, no. As for Austin's answer, the psychedelic jackass pissed him off a little bit too much, and he believed it was a conspiracy between Vince and Dude Love. The fans definitely believed it too, and he promised that he'll whoop his ass eventually. Austin was a bit impatient for Unforgiven in Your House and guaranteed that he'll get his hands on both Vince and Dude Love. It was clear that he was in a foul mood, but hey, I don't need to tell you that. You can see it for yourself. There, that nice Steve Blackman got screwed over. It was a bizarre finish. Then Austin runs in there and kicks both of their asses. Dude was aggressive. The crowd was loud. It was some very exciting stuff. McMahon didn't get his though, and Dude and Austin continued fighting to end Raw. As for In Your House, Stone Cold made an abrupt appearance during the show to question the timekeeper Mark Eaton. He asked if it was Vince who told him to ring the bell last week. The reason why I was asking him these questions was because he wasn't ready to be screwed and was going to drag his ass up and down the arena also if he went through with it. He threatened his life, stating that, sure, Vince fires you for not screwing me, but you could find another job. But if you do go through with it, well, you're going to have to find another life or something like that. Meanwhile, Vince was claiming something catastrophic was going to happen tonight. He mentioned how he is a native of North Carolina, and they weren't proud of that. And as for the conspiracy theory, he refused to be held responsible for what happens in the main event, and he didn't want to accept any responsibility if Stone Cold Steve Austin screws himself. As for the match itself, fun, I liked it. Crowd was once again very exciting, which is a joy. Both men engaged in a non-stop brawl, and it's often underrated, but for very good reasons. Nothing wrong with it, just came at the wrong time, that's all. Both men were very aggressive out there. Outlandish bumps throughout the match. JR was pretty funny last time around, and Vince once again had to be out there to watch the match. No, this was only a couple of months after Montreal, so there might have been a possibility that he could affect the outcome of the match. He did play his part in giving Dude the advantage at one point. And speaking of Dude, what the hell is up with him? Like, what is he doing over here? He's taking these ridiculous ass bumps, and man, I commend him for that. He doesn't really have to do it, but he does it for the fans. There was the obligatory ref bump, mandible claw, but Austin fought back. McMahon tried reviving the referee, but he wasn't waking up. And he obviously had to get involved once again, but it didn't really do much. As a matter of fact, Stone Cold blasted him with a chair. The fans were going crazy. He hits the stunner on Dude Love, but there was no ref. He counts himself to victory, and with Stone Cold, there's no inconveniences. He literally won the match for himself there. That chair struck Vince so badly that they had to get him a stretcher. Despite the victory, it ended up being overruled in favor of Dude Love, DQ win due to Austin striking a WWF official, and so the pay-per-view ended in a way forcing the viewer to tune into Raw the next night. Austin essentially sent him to the hospital, and the expectation was that there was going to be repercussions. The next night on Raw's War, Dude Love made it seem like he whooped Austin's ass, but since Austin took the easy way out, well, the dude was without the gold. All the jargon summed up, he wanted a title shot. He was talking with his weird slang words or whatever. Not only that, but he suggested Austin get his title stripped and handed over to himself. In other places, the owner whined about how Stone Cold Steve Austin tried taking his head, and due to the chair shot, he suffered a mild concussion. As for firing Stone Cold, not yet. He announced a WWF title match with Goldust challenging for the gold. The official for the match, Gerald Briscoe. He also announced that if Stone Cold lays a single finger on the referee, not only will he be stripped of the title, but he will also be fired. Jerry took the time to provoke Austin, knowing very well that he couldn't touch him, and he did promise to be an impartial referee, so there's that. At this point, McMahon was very desperate in getting the title off Stone Cold. He probably would have considered Goldust a month ago in storyline, but things change. Dude Love was pissed off about this announcement and stormed off in anger. He's like, I wear tie-dye, I beat Austin, but this is what I get. Vince was upset about being filmed, and that's all from that camp. Stone Cold wasn't all that positive about defending the title. He wasn't really that angry about it. It was more about Vince screwing him. That's what really upsets him. He didn't give a damn if he had to defend the title every night. The main event, as expected, had some controversy. For one, Austin had the match, but Briscoe preferred to do a slow count. Once he reached 2, something fell into his eye or whatever. Then Dude Love runs in there and tries to redeem himself in Vince's eyes. He fails miserably, and as McMahon tries sneaking up to Austin trying to hit him with the title, he knocks down Briscoe, and the whole thing, it was bad for those guys. Nothing worked out at all. Even when he stacks the deck against him, it doesn't matter. He managed to overcome it. Also, side note, this Raw was the most watched professional wrestling show in cable, keyword cable history, drawing a 5.71 rating. Monday Nitro drew a 1.72 due to the fact that the NBA playoffs were going on. You know, they're on TNT, and it aired at 12:30 Eastern. Just wanted to mention this stuff. On the May 4th, 1998 episode of Raw's War, Mick Foley kicked off the show with the Dude Shack in normal attire. He was frustrated with what's gone down recently, most importantly the title shot thing, but also the fact that he was booked to face his good friend Terry Funk in a hardcore match. He refused to throw 13 years down the drain sucking up to Vince McMahon, and he didn't want his family to see him dancing with second-rate strippers, and he was damned if he performed in the Dude Love attire. So he was back to Cactus Jack. This led to the boss coming out. Foley threw the tie-dye right into McMahon's face, and he finally responded. The owner reminded Foley that sure, you want it Unforgiven, but Stone Cold Steve Austin is still the WWF champion. He criticized Foley's whining last week, stating that he expected better from him, and the Terry Funk match isn't a punishment in his eyes, it's a reward. If he beats his friend within an inch of his life, reaches into his heart, and pulls it out, then and only then will Foley have made the kind of sacrifice that's necessary to beat Austin and become the World Wrestling Federation champion. Damn, he's got that cult leader mindset. Foley understood that pep talk got him motivated. Not only that, but he also got a slap. All of a sudden, the rattlesnake made his way down with a grappling hook. Why? I don't know. Oh, that's why. Mick Foley ended up leaving as Austin's raising hell. Now, the main event saw Stone Cold Steve Austin stay as a guest commentator, during the Terry Funk and Mick Foley match. He drank beer probably the first time on a regular basis. Mick Foley had no music during his entrance, and yes, he did destroy his friend. Pat Patterson, rest in peace, was the special guest referee. Terry Funk took a huge amount of punishment, but was very resilient. He took 2 pile drivers in the ring, not to mention a spot on the concrete floor, and that was finally enough for the win. Despite this, Foley was leaning into his deranged side and continued the attack. Austin decides it's time to provoke him and does just that with a cup of beer. Patterson got involved, boom, stunner. That wasn't it. Dude Loves music plays, and out came McMahon with the ladies and the attire. He redeemed himself, and this is the best part for me. Austin's just about to laugh his ass off, and why wouldn't he? I mean, the boss is out there dancing, doing some of the most random stuff. Mr. McMahon is living his best life, as you can see here. I probably would have burst out laughing at that moment. The following week, McMahon introduced the new #1 contender, Dude Love, and he's all corporate. He's even got a newspaper in hand by the looks of it, and what about the teeth? Also, look at that side. Mr. Foley spoke in such a professional manner, and he basically became the champion Stone Cold was intended to be. Apparently, he was a speaker in 4 languages, a reader of Greek tragedy, and a student of American history. And that honestly reads like a Facebook bio. He even proclaimed himself to be the toughest SOB to a chorus of boos, and instead of dancing, they hugged this time around. That wasn't it. The guest timekeeper ended up being Gerald Briscoe. And look at the teacher's pet. Right when Vince mentioned the G in Gerald, out he ran. It's like he's so proud to be representing McMahon. I mean, that's what it was, I guess, but yeah, that's what I think. He was ready to do anything for Mr. McMahon. The guest ring announcer for the match at Over the Limit, Pat Patterson. Boos were in the air, and best of all, the special guest referee for that main event, he's in a bus of mediocrity? Oh, I know what it is. It's Shawn Michaels, finally. Too bad he was running late. McMahon went to check on the referee, who was too nervous to appear, and after a while, Patterson finally introduced him as the best there was, the best there is, and the best there ever will be, Vince McMahon. And yes, the fans booed him. They absolutely hated this guy's guts. The referee mocked Austin, and the funny part in all of this was the fact that the champion was completely unaware of what's going on. Once he arrived, he called them the 3 jackasses and claimed they'll never take the title away from him. Austin wasn't happy about being in a tag match, and once again, he ran out there a while later. Crowd, once again, very exciting, and he was not out here to cry and complain. He knew that Vince couldn't stand him, but that's also the same feeling he has, Once again, Austin wanted the boss to come out and let him know what's going on tonight. Vince from a distance refused to give away much, and once it was time for the main event, the Nation ended up being the mystery tag team Austin was set to face. The partner? Vince McMahon. Tag team partner never really entered the match. Austin, though, still had some fight in him despite the isolation. He went to business himself, and just as he got the win in his hands, Vince comes in with a clothesline. The Stooges come in, but they accomplish nothing. Dude Love enters the ring, and this moment in itself is what I love about the Attitude Era. These guys all had beef with someone, and it ends in the craziest way possible with the fans going nuts. DX had issues with the Nation. Dustin Rhodes was angry with Vince. It all made sense, and I just love those Raw and Nitros that end in chaos. 2 weeks before Over the Edge, Mr. McMahon announced Stone Cold suffered a mild concussion. Knowing that he was going to come anyways, well, he barred him from the building. Then he introduced Dude Love. Once again, professional vocabulary. It was the same stuff about how he'll capture championship gold and how his name will be announced after the match. McMahon, by the looks of it, was just so enamored with every passing word Foley uttered. He then called out Dustin Rhodes, and that's a whole other story. Meanwhile, Stone Cold destroyed the security guard and entered the arena. Once again, he came out and demanded that they bring their coward asses to the ring, and this time he threatened to tear down every 50K camera there was in the arena. And out he came. Vince didn't appreciate the fact that Austin barged in and the fact that he's insulting his associates, Patterson and Briscoe. The champion had enough of all this trash and he wanted to settle it in a match against all three of them. Austin asked the crowd, and that was one of the loudest hell yeahs you'll ever hear. Patterson and Briscoe finally expressed their dissatisfaction with Austin verbally, and in an effort to have things go down the fair way, 2 out of 3 of them were going to face the man, the Texas Rattlesnake, in a street fight. But there was a little damper on this whole situation. The police were looking for him. I assume it's due to an assault charge, he assaulted that security guard. McMahon continuously provoked the Texas Rattlesnake and made it seem like he regret the match not happening because he's a tough guy. And about a half hour later, the security guard didn't press charges for odd reasons, and so Steve was released. Austin was more than appreciative of the fact that the guy didn't press charges. The main event went down, and as expected, Mr. McMahon didn't compete. There was, however, a special referee, the Commissioner, Sergeant Slaughter. Al Snow stuck in the front row, that's a whole other story. And those guys got what's coming to him. Dude Love ended up having to come to the rescue. There was a street fight all over the ringside area, the crowd's cheering, Foley's tripping. But then a fan blasted Austin with a chair, and it ended up being Vince. He's in Austin's disguise, and he almost got his ass beat, but the plan worked out very well. Austin chants intensified, but he never fought back. He did after the show, though. On the final Raw before Over the Edge, yet another memorable segment occurred. As expected, Mr. McMahon opened up the show to discuss the trolling from last week. He showed footage that made it seem like the Stooges gave the champion a hard time. McMahon felt very good about this, stating that he assaulted Stone Cold Steve Austin and got away with it. As for Over the Edge, it will be the demise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. It didn't take the champion long to respond. Crowd is loud. I don't even need to say it at this point. He said that Vince proved that he's the dumbest SOB. Why? Because the owner of the company admitted that he assaulted Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Texas Rattlesnake demanded they arrest the piece of trash, but he was claiming it was a figure of speech. And it didn't matter to the police officers. He was embarrassed, and Steve then got those 2 arrested for obstruction of justice. Later that night, however, Vince was freed after apologizing to Austin. He really forced it out of him, but after being uncuffed, he had this evil face on him, and on the War Zone, he complained about being arrested in public like a common criminal. He didn't like the beer being poured down his neck, add to that having a condition upon his release, that being forced to apologize. McMahon was then bragging about how there isn't one WWF star that intimidates him, but that wasn't it. He then announced a match between Stone Cold and The Undertaker. About the match, the boss made himself the special referee, and as if seeing him earlier wasn't enough, the match never got going because The Undertaker chokeslammed him. He did say there was nobody intimidating, so yeah. Then Kane runs in there and they brawl. Both men disappears, the glass shatters, and the real business was gonna pick up. The Stooges received a stunner, Vince is tied up, and just as Dude Love comes in and makes the save, he fails. That's the most Mick Foley thing I've ever seen. It was high intensity, high energy, high gear. What can possibly go wrong at Over the Edge? About that match, well, if you put a gun to my head and ask, what match captures the Attitude Era so perfectly? This match. Was it the greatest match from the Attitude Era? Doubtful. Maybe it is to you, and honestly, it's in my top 5 from that era. That's one thing for sure. One of the best crowd reactions, one of the best brawls you'll ever see, 5 amazing characters, 2 of the all-time greatest brawlers. It was honestly some of the most ridiculously awesome, tremendous, great, entertaining stuff you'll ever see. No lie about it. It was a pure classic. The story between Austin and McMahon was clear. He wanted a champion that he could control, and Steve was essentially a PR nightmare. McMahon's preferences changed over time. Hell, he would have taken Goldust, another controversial figure, as champion over Steve. It wasn't just about Austin's character and morals, although that's a big reason as to why he hates him. Vince just hated the man himself. Every time he sees him, he gets angry. Before the match, Michael Cole asked the champion if he thinks this is the final time he'll walk to the ring as champ. It was clear that there was no doubt in his mind that he's retaining, and as for an enforcer, Steve believed everybody was so scared of Vince that they wouldn't risk going out there. McMahon himself claimed that he will be fair and impartial. Also, apparently, Pat's dream was to announce a new champion. That's something he's always wanted to do. Vince threatened to strip Austin of the title. If he assaults him by his hand, the match ends. Nobody else, and I should note that's very crucial to the result of the match. Okay, Pat Patterson received the longest introduction for a ring announcer I've ever seen. Gerald Briscoe's introduction wasn't short either. Hell, they even promoted his brother and himself's body shop. The ridiculous part is that Pat gave the entire address, phone number of the body shop, and he was just wasting time. The fans were getting irritated as the seconds go on, and it peaked when it was time to introduce the American Icon. Nobody in the crowd was happy to see him, and I thought that was it, but I forgot about the challenger. They wasted a bunch of time on him also, and when it was time for the champion, the guy that holds the most coveted title in the company, they trashed him. Hell, Patterson refused to introduce him, but it didn't matter. Why? Because the fans loved that guy. Vince himself just wanted that title in his hands, showing a sign of what's to come, you know? Once you let go of it, you're not going to get it back or something like that. And just as the bell's about to ring, the Undertaker's music played. So there was a volunteer that was going to force Vince to call it like it is. About the match itself, one of the best brawls ever, no lie. Very hot crowd. Vince was going for fast count. Dude's teeth came flying out. Exciting back and forth action. The Undertaker was lurking over Vince, who decides it's time to remind the crowd that this is a no disqualification match, which I should note, it wasn't beforehand. From there, it turned into chaos and anarchy in the best way possible. Briscoe got knocked down. This spot was absolutely mental. JR shouting. Then it was announced as falls count anywhere. They were changing up the rules as the match went along. And it wasn't like both men slowed down on the outside. At times, it was much faster than it was inside the ring. They bumped into cars. Dude Love went for a damn sunset flip off a car. Wild would be an understatement to describe what was happening during this match. Blood was drawn. Austin was at a total disadvantage, even with The Undertaker around. Patterson was tripping him. Foley takes control. It was bad for him. Things did seem pretty bleak for Stone Cold, but he managed to turn things around and hit himself with a chair. He had some momentum at this point. He knocked down Dude Love. Then Vince let his ego get the best of him. Dude comes in and accidentally hits his boss with the chair, and boom, stunner. The excitement in JR's voice when he says it, man, that's truly something. Unfortunately, though, there was no referee. Mike Yoda runs in but is pulled away by Pat Patterson, and The Undertaker decides to finally intervene and chokeslam him through the announce table. Briscoe, he gets a chokeslam also. And the ring, Austin escapes the claw and hits another stunner. He drags Vince's lifeless body and forces him to make that count, and finally, he's beaten Dude Love. He's retained the title. Now that's a main event. Taker did his work, and man, that was truly special. It was special in every sense of the word. It was a classic. It was everything you'd want in a brawl, in a no DQ match. The blueprint for every Attitude Era main event. I felt like Austin and Brett was the typical blueprint, but watching this is what every match followed. Like, this is what every match tried to be like in the Attitude Era in the main event. Brett and Austin wasn't that overbooked. This one, though, yeah, it makes sense. It's like they started to use this template of a match afterwards. Even though many of them followed, the first is arguably the very best. The crowd was consistently loud for every move, be it from Dude or Austin. They reacted to everything. And also, I like the fact that McMahon's promise came true. My hand will end this match. He wasn't lying about that one. I highly recommend you watch this if you never have. It's something I consider to be on the highest level, honestly. It's literally one of the greatest matches WWE had in the 90s. Hell, it's one of their best matches from 98. It probably is the best. Depends on what you think. Now that Dude Love was bested and showed that he couldn't stop Stone Cold Steve Austin, nobody probably could. The tyrannical boss fired McFoley. So what's next? For one, The Undertaker cut a worked shoe promo about the WWF and Vince McMahon, and in essence, he wanted a title shot. Vince was pushing some buttons, but managed to keep Taker in check by giving him a #1 contenders match against his own brother, Kane. About that main event, Stone Cold was guest commentator, and Vince was anything but happy over this. He was forced to sit down with his arch nemesis to watch the main event, and near the end of that match, Taker had it won, but Mankind comes in with a mandible claw. This was the first appearance of Mankind in nearly 5 months, I should know. Vince was somewhat happy to see him, and his interference gave way to a Kane victory. Tensions between the two men grew as Raw went off the air. It went off the air after the other two fought, so they say. Now, I would talk about McFoley, but this is a Stone Cold video. I felt like he wanted to save his job. He wanted to redeem himself in Vince's eyes, and he was kind of embarrassed, so he reverted to the Mankind character. Who knows, might have to make him a 3 Faces of Foley video and try to explain this stuff in kayfabe or something. It'd be cool. The following week, the boss was in a very festive mood. Apparently, he was going to have a little ceremony at the end of the night. Austin was going to be there too since he was the champion. So he comes out literally wearing a black tie. Vince was annoyed over this but let it slide because this was his night. Apparently, he was being honored with 2 Humanitarian of the Year awards. Both Darnell and George did admit Austin was their favorite wrestler, so there's that. Vince was all acting nice. It's cool, he's your favorite wrestler. The PR stuff. Deep down, he was angry. Vince thanked the fans and tried to extend his hand to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and it was at this moment JR sensed something's up. He thought this was unnecessary. Fans booed and Steve pickpocketed him and took advantage of the moment to donate to a cause. He preferred if Vince was Jackass of the Year and Taker's music played. It was clear that there was some sort of setup, there was druids and caskets, but it ended up being Kane and Mankind. They jumped him and Taker had his own issues in the back. Austin gets tossed into the casket. Fans boo. McMahon's ecstatic as Raw concludes. So basically, the whole humanitarian thing was a way of buying time in order to have Kane and Mankind attack and best Austin. Taker was following Vince, he had some issues with him, but that stuff was easily settled with the police and whatnot. Austin immediately responded to the issue the following week, and he was tired of this chicken stuff McMahon's been playing, and the boss ended up running away. He tried getting Austin to react in a way that didn't involve violence, but he wasn't having it. But he managed to calm him down by placing the blame on whom? Whom, you might ask? The Undertaker. He was just grasping at straws, but Vince's reasoning sort of swayed Stone Cold into that direction. Both himself and Steve felt for the Undertaker who had a plan intact that saw Kane and Mankind attack. He surrounded himself with police to not make the save, you know. The whole conspiracy was going to be put to the test because the dead man made his way to the ring. He said that it's true that he made a challenge for the gold, but he did it like a man. As for the whole theory, it's a damn lie. Then Kane and Mankind appeared. Debut of the shirt and tie, I should note. Paul Bearer added fuel to the fire, claiming that the Undertaker, like Satan himself, wants to take Steve Austin's soul. On behalf of both Kane and Mankind, he challenged both men to a Hell in a Cell tag team match. Bearer called the ring the entrance to the highway to hell, and about those two, well, Steve wasn't really trusting the Undertaker and vice versa, so basically, it was going to be an odd pairing. Undertaker stated, how could you trust someone whose literal motto is DTA? You know, don't trust anybody, and it made sense to him. Now, for some odd reason, Mankind and Kane competed in a tag team battle royal. They won and were patiently awaiting their opponents. In the meantime, Paul Bearer provoked them. Austin comes out, but Taker was nowhere to be found, so Mankind tries to bring the fight. It was 2-on-1, and Paul locked himself in the cage. He's all safe. This was a huge wrongdoing because the Undertaker respawned from under the ring and gave him a much-deserved beating. Kane was desperately trying to find a way in, but to no avail. Paul was eventually lacerated. Austin had no troubles with Mankind, and Raw concluded just as it used to, in chaos. After the show, Steve ended up winning the match. And other than the fact that this was the most random Hell in a Cell, other than the 2011 one, I find it funny that WCW coincidentally had a cage that had a roof on top of it of their own on the same night, you know, keyword coincidentally. I heard Dusty and others got news of the Cell match and wanted to do something similar, but it was just a glorified cage match. With that said, on the final Raws War before the King of the Ring, Mr. McMahon came out and announced the match between Kane and Stone Cold Steve Austin will be a first blood match. He revealed that Kane was so confident he'll win the title that, and this is the first time Kane ever spoke, I should note, if he does not win the title, he'll set himself on fire. Paul Bearer at home was raging because, well, he's 100 miles away from his son and couldn't do anything about it. Paul knew his son very well, you know, if he says it, he's gonna do it, but he promised to appear at the pay-per-view where his son will be crowned the WWF champion. Kane in other places was going crazy because his father was attacked by the Undertaker. And at the end of the night, Stone Cold finally gave his answer regarding the first blood stipulation. It was going to be interviewed by Sable, but he preferred to speak alone in the middle of the ring. He said that he wasn't afraid of bleeding and basically accepted. He mocked Kane's proclamation of setting himself on fire, stating that he'll bring the marshmallows, the beer, and he'll celebrate. Kane finally responded to those statements, but he was more known for letting his actions speak louder than his words, and that's exactly what happened when he poured some stuff onto the WWF champion. Kane said that the blood on Austin will be for real on Sunday. One thing to note about the match heading into Pittsburgh is that Austin was hospitalized 2 nights before the event due to a staph infection, and also he had a high fever. I believe it was 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The match itself, despite Austin's injury, wasn't bad. Cell was lowered, making it a first blood cell match, and it was one of those Attitude Era brawls like I mentioned earlier. Kane was hanging from the cell, and the story was simple. How can Austin bust open a masked monster? Mankind eventually interferes, which is astonishing to think about. The cell is lowered again. He took a stunner. Kane attempts to chokeslam. It's unsuccessful, and he receives the stunner. All of a sudden, The Undertaker runs in there with a chair. Mankind ducks, and Austin takes the shot. Taker realizes what's up, but he's not really apologetic. Austin's busted open, and for some odd reason, The Undertaker tosses the ref into the ring trying to wake him up or something. I'm not even sure. Hebner's awake, and on the other side, Stone Cold's desperately trying to bust open the big red machine. It's like the 95th minute of a football soccer game. He was trying to escape the loss. Kane gets the chair shot in, but the ref notices Austin's bloody face, and so rings the bell. He was obviously pissed, but there was nothing he can do about it. And Howard Finkel's introduction, the winner of this match, and there's this pause like this, and no, it was so damn dramatic. Vince in the skybox had a smile on his face, and JR softly saying no as King of the Ring went off the air. And that's Stone Cold Steve Austin's first title reign. The story of Austin and McMahon was just so damn entertaining. High quality stuff on a weekly or near weekly basis. Memorable title reign that set up Austin perfectly, and right out of the gate he got a perfect foil in Vince McMahon. Fans disliked the guy, and whoever he brings in can feud with Austin. It made sense. One name that I thought could have been cool, my opinion, who knows how it would have went down if it actually did happen, was Ric Flair. There's a story from Jim Cornette, I believe, that during April of 1998, Flair had some legal issues with Eric Bischoff and WCW, and he really considered joining WWF so hard that he was driving around the Greensboro Coliseum the night of the In Your House pay-per-view. He was going to sit down in the front row, and he was going to be introduced as Flair, and the focus was going to be on his son Reed because he was an amateur wrestler. But the Lord swayed Flair in a different direction, and it didn't happen. I think it would have been an awesome pay-per-view program for Stone Cold being 1 or 2, and I think it would have went down. It would have been very fun. You know, Flair wears the suits, Vince respects him, stuff like that. Either way, Mick Foley was the very best choice that Austin had post-WrestleMania. No other guy. If you had Triple H, he wasn't that big of a star yet. Sure, there's a story of how Austin beat his friend Shawn Michaels and whatnot, but nah. I don't think it would have been better than the Foley program, so there's that. Okay, I would definitely dive into his next title reign, you know, the one from the next night. I'll dive into that, and you can consider this Austin McMahon Part 1 also. Next one, Austin McMahon Part 2. Austin's title reign Part 2, and from there we'll find a way to make other Austin and McMahon feud videos, so there's that. What did you guys think of this title reign? Please comment down below. And that's your first video. Make sure you hit a Luthez press on the like button and perhaps a Stone Cold Stunner on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.